Our next panelist is Joe Neib, the Director of Business Development for Herzog. I'll pass it off to Joe.
Thank you. I don't have the appearance nor the credentials of Ed Ellis, but we know him and respect him and their company and the Iowa Pacific. I do appreciate very much the opportunity to represent Herzog and the Herzog companies and believe strongly in the work and the efforts that the Texas Rail advocates do. And Herzog has been in business since 1969. We're a heavy highway, railroad, mass transit, environmental contractor, and we're heavily involved in operations and also the manufacture of very unique, efficient, and safe rail equipment. I'd like to not only thank the Texas Rail advocates, but TxDOT and our Class 1 partners, of which we're strategic providers of construction services and equipment to all of them, our short line partners, and in particular, just as I was coming up here, I've been with Herzog since 1970, so that was shortly after we started in business. But Bill Glavin said, "How long is it going to take for me to get forgiveness for recommending that I come up here and take Ed Ellis's place?" Well, let me tell you something about Bill Glavin. He was either the youngest or one of the youngest chief engineers, vice president of engineering for the Burlington Northern Railroad, and I want to give you very sincere thanks, because in the growth of our organization, he's one of the people that believed we could do what they asked us to do, and that we would perform, and we did, and it was a successful venture. And we've had many unofficial public-private partnerships with the railroad industry through our whole career. So that's before it became a buzzword, and there were specific guidelines for that. We've been doing that for a long time. I'd also like to thank and recognize some of our joint venture partners here. Stacy and Whitbeck, we've been working with building transit projects, some of which we have gone on to operate and so forth for over 16 years. Archer Western Walsh, we've been working for 10 years together. We compete against each other, we work together, and then as well, all our short line partners, and you've heard about the Siemens locomotives that are going to all aboard of Florida. We've been operating, maintaining, and working with Siemens, traction power, signal, electrification, and their vehicles since they put the first one on the ground in the United States. And when you talk about public-private partnerships, Siemens and Stacy and Whitbeck were part of a joint venture that we were on that many of you know about, the Eagle project in Denver for RTD. That was the largest transportation public-private partnership in the U.S. We weren't successful, but we spent a lot of money and a couple of years going through our concessionaire, who went bankrupt, and getting another one, and so forth. So it was an exciting learning curve. You've heard lots about safety, and I personally have worked for the old CB&Q Railroad for 3 years when I was trying to go to school, and providing income and that. And boy, things have changed since I did that. And from Herzog's standpoint, our corporate headquarters used to be right next to the railroad tracks in St. Joseph, Missouri. At one time, there were 7 Class I railroads that served St. Joe, Missouri, and now there's 2. So, and we also used to stand, sit, or whatever next to the railroad tracks and dream about what we're doing today with the industry, and it's pretty phenomenal. The comments that Rusty made about All Aboard Florida and the Flagler, Henry Flagler, and so forth. If you haven't read The Last Train to Paradise and a couple other books about that, I strongly recommend that. The bridges that is now Highway 1 going into Key West was part of the old Flagler Railroad, what's known as Flagler's Folly, that go into Key West. They did happen to be built by a young construction engineer who worked for the Missouri Valley Bridge Company, who Flagler found building a port down in southern Mexico, and had him come down there and build those bridges, and he actually passed away on that project. But anyway, it's there's some pretty phenomenal things about that. Just this week, the National Railroad Contractors had their annual meeting in Boca Raton, and I went up and went through the Flagler Museum, and I've been to the Breakers before. Phenomenal place, but you know, there's a lot of history there. Our experience, we've been building rail projects in Florida for 25 years. We've operated the Tri-Rail system for 13 years. We currently have a proposal, along with 5 other proposers, to operate the South Florida Regional Transit operation, or Tri-Rail, again, and we're cautiously optimistic, but we'll see how that shakes out. You've also heard a lot about safety. From our standpoint, it's part of our culture, as well as it is the Genesee and Wyoming and the Class I railroads and the short line industry. Just this week, 4 of our companies got a platinum award for 100% of the qualifications for obtaining these safety awards at the National Railroad Contractors Association. Our modifier in the last 10 years has gone from 0.53 to 0.43, and that's one of the lowest in all of the construction industry. So it's number 1 on our list. And we've in the past belonged to an insurance captive where it was a group of 40 plus privately held contractors, most construction contractors. They were concerned about what we did because we're out on an operating railroad, whether it be freight or passenger, every day. And so they get pretty concerned about that, and so we're no longer part of that because we were exempted from a few things that they may have to be responsible and share in, and we're one of the safest contractors. So anyway, from the passenger operations business, Herzog operates under Herzog Transit Services, Inc., 12 commuter rail, light rail, streetcar projects throughout North America and Puerto Rico. And we're very proud of that. Here in Texas, we've operated the Trinity Railway Express since 1996, I believe, and then we built and operated, along with Archer Western, our joint venture partner for construction, the Denton County Regional Rail Project, and just this year we lost the operations contract for that, but we're quite proud of the work and record that we had there. We operate the Capital Metro in Austin and have been involved with rebuilding that and improving the systems and signals part of that. A group of our interns here recently were asking me of all the places that I've worked where I really like to work and what I did, and I said, well, from the early 80s through today, but even more the mid-90s, I spent an awful lot of time all over Texas, and I love this place, and the people in it, and the innovation, and the successes that it has. And so I commend the state of Texas, the citizens of Texas, and TxDOT for all that they do, because there's some things that they do here that aren't done in other parts of the country. As critical as we may be of the legislature and so forth, I mean, they're going to do what you pound on their desk to do, and you just got to keep pounding. One of the most unique and unfunded mandates that you've heard about here has been the positive train control that the railroads are confronted with, both the Class 1s and short lines. I'd like to recognize Herzog Technologies, which we've got 3 of our people here in the audience, and we do installation of hardware and software and wayside for the Class 1 and short line railroads and the passenger rail industry. And you've heard a lot about this backroom support. We do that. We both develop it and we manage and operate it. So we're quite proud of what our whole portfolio is and of the industry. And I thank you very much. And I've forgiven you, Bill Glavin. So anyway, somehow or another, there was somebody flying around and put a bug in his ear and said, I could come up and talk to you about the industry. And one quick thing is on Rusty and Mr. Keith's comments about high-speed rail and higher speed rail. Why, a couple of these projects that are streetcars, which were, you know, the mode of transportation in urban areas and interurban many years ago, which were torn out and abandoned and so forth, are now being rebuilt and built, and they're economic development drivers, and they're mode of a very safe and dependable transportation. Our Kansas City streetcar that ourselves and Stacy and Whitbeck completed, and it's been open a little over a year, had 1 million riders in less than the first year. The Cincinnati streetcar, which was a very contentious project, in the first quarter, there are over 300,000 riders. So, you know, it's a significant effort, and it doesn't go near as fast as the higher speed or the high speed. But I've ridden them all. So anyway, that's our industry, and we thank you very much.
Not sure if our mics are on. Yeah, I think we're on. We've got time for a couple of questions. I'll throw out the first question if you've got one. We've got a couple of folks I think are wandering the floor with a microphone. So just raise your hand. But I'll throw this to the group. We'll take a minute to talk about the events in November. Obviously, with the new administration coming in, and the Transportation Secretary designate Elaine Chao has specifically in the last week talked about engaging the private sector to help build and rebuild the nation's infrastructure. That would seem to imply that they want to open the door more broadly to private sector investment in all modes of transportation. I'm sitting up here with three private sector professionals who are already engaged in the transportation industry. So I was wondering, and Rusty obviously has a couple of different hats that he can wear from his days in D.C. and also from his perspective with Brightline and all aboard. But all of you as participants, private sector participants in infrastructure delivery today, what are your thoughts on an expanded marketplace with potentially more competition or more incentives for businesses like yours to move projects faster, to do more projects? As that landscape evolves, you guys will be, and certainly Herzog, who's been around for more than 40 years, but even new projects like Texas Central and the All Aboard programs are going to be veterans compared to folks that may be potentially getting into this space. So what's your perspective on an evolved and expanded marketplace?
Well, if you want private sector to invest in infrastructure, if you do projects like we are doing, like the Brightline project, I'm sure the Texas project's undergoing the same thing. If you want to if you want to discourage investment in this type of activity, just put the federal government in charge. Part of the problem that we have is dealing with the bureaucracy. There was a comment made with regard to the All Aboard Florida project by a senior official at FRA that we were too impatient, that it takes a good 8 to 10 or more years to get a project like this off the ground and operating, and you all just need to understand that. But that's not what private sector wants to hear. And so if you want to incentivize companies to take the risk with their own money and their own investors' money, I think you need to find ways to reduce those regulations, to streamline these processes, make things move more quickly. I don't know, the agencies, federal railroad in particular, but many of the other local ones in Florida, they sit on stuff forever, and I'm sure everybody in this business experiences that kind of activity. Congress has tried to implement some streamlining activities in the latest FAST Act they passed last year. Actually, streamlining was started in the MAP 21 bill, passed when Congressman Mica was chairman of the committee, and then the FAST Act under Chairman Schuster brought some more streamlining activities, but it's really not where it should be. And then we have the financing mechanisms that the federal government has put in place. We have TIFIA, we have the RIF loan, that's Railroad Rehabilitation Infrastructure Financing, RIF. That program is a disaster. They have ability to loan, I think, $35 billion, and they've only loaned since this has been around in 20-something years, $1.5 billion or $2 billion. Private activity bonds is another program where it's just very hard to get the federal government to unleash our ability to create economies and grow our businesses. So those are the kinds of things we do. Secretary Chao, the new Secretary of Transportation, just testified before the Senate Committee for a confirmation hearing this week, and she said one of the central planks of the Trump administration and her role as Secretary of Transportation will be to find ways to encourage more private investment in infrastructure and transportation. And that's what we need to push our members of Congress to follow through on.
Joe, any thoughts on that?
I echo Rusty's comments. I do want to go back to my presentation and two entities that I forgot to recognize was our dear friends in the consulting and engineering business, who there's a number of those in attendance today, and it all starts with that. And my favorite little comment about the consulting industry is that if you don't know what 3,000 consultants are in the bottom of the ocean, it's a start. So,
I thought that was for a time.
and then to Rusty's and his former boss's credit, John Mica wasn't just about Florida. He was about the whole country and rail transportation and transportation in general. And for those people in this room that happened to be at the National Railroad Contractors meeting in Boca Raton, we had a speaker and a workshop by an FRA director, and it was pathetic. I mean, you know, there's a mandate coming down to the industry that you've got to qualify for, and it's just unbelievable that they really don't know how to administer it. And then they go and tell you, well, we know most of you people have had problems getting into our website. Our portals have been down for a while and so forth. But I mean, there's no excuse for that, and there's no excuse for the railroad, the RIF loan program not being out here and help to provide funding for projects in Texas. And sure, you got to bring other sources of funding in there, but that's just, it's got to, you got to have, you know, 3 legs to a stool, and that's one of them. So anyway, that's my comments, and we're involved with every organization that has anything to do with our business, and infrastructure crumbling in this country is a fact, and you need to fix it, and you need to improve it, and all modes of transportation, all modes of water, wastewater, electric grids, and that it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be built. So,
No doubt about it.
Yeah, right on top of that, just a couple of comments about the intersection of private capital and public infrastructure. I think the government, state and federal, continue to fund repairing existing infrastructure. I think that on the far end of that, the market-justified projects will be driven by private companies. And the intersection of those in the middle that either don't quite make sense today or will take time to prove out, we'll see PPPs continue to drive those. So the intersection will be, the government will still fund things that need to be done, and the private sector will drive innovation. I don't think the government will ever have enough capital to drive innovation, to your points. And they're not positioned in any way whatsoever to drive innovation.
well, I think one of the unique aspects of that is, or in Texas, you know, the expressway and toll road system and that have, you know, continuously goes up and down, depends on you know, the amount of pressure put on the legislature. But you know, it's amazing that people are willing to sit in traffic and not figure out how much fuel and wear and tear they're putting on a vehicle, and they can go out here and these express toll roads and so forth are now being regulated by what they call congestion pricing. So if there's nobody on there, the price goes down. If there's lots of people on there, it goes up. But you know, I've experienced the fact that I can go from DFW to Saginaw in 25 minutes, or I can spend an hour and a half to 2 hours. So anyway, that's my comments on that.
That's good. Well, I want to be respectful of our next speaker, and I think I'll wrap things up. I want to thank each of you for taking time to join us today and talk about what is clearly a new day in passenger rail travel, both here in the Southwest region and also the country. So very best of luck to Brightline. We're excited. Hopefully come back next year, tell us things are going well. Tim, know great things are coming for this area. Folks who've joined us here from Houston in a couple of years, hopefully they'll be able to just roll right in here after a quick and safe, reliable trip. And Joe, I know that you and your team will continue to make sure everybody gets where they need to go safely as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.